All right, junior high. Just want to go over your material for chapter 26 for history this week. I'm going to be discussing the material you're going to be reading, and then you'll need to go ahead and read through the chapter yourself, and then we'll start working on your activity sheets, and then I'll put out another video going over those, just like I did last week. So that way you don't have to second guess yourself, or if there's a portion that you're not quite understanding, then I can go over that with you. But chapter 26 is going to be a pretty exciting chapter. Just a kind of an intro to the chapter. I'm going to read what the author writes here. She writes, "Throughout my entire lifetime, I have memories of hearing about conflicts in the Middle East. When I was a very little girl in the early 1980s, I remember wondering why there was so much fighting in this area. I fell in love with maps and geography at about the age of 4 from reading my Bible. I knew that this is where most of the biblical narrative had taken place. From the believed location of the Tower of Babel to the children of Israel wandering in the desert for 40 years, I understood that this geographical location was drenched in historical events." So she was in love with the Middle East and Israel because this is where so many things from the Bible had happened. She says, "I didn't know until I was a teenager about the events that have unfolded there since the coming of Christ and the scattering of the Jewish people throughout the earth. You and I have learned together about this scattering, known as the Jewish diaspora, during the Roman Empire and the complete fall of the biblical nation of Israel. We learned about the formation of the Ottoman Empire during the Middle Ages and how it spread far and wide throughout the Middle East, including the area where the biblical Jewish people had lived. It would eventually envelop the last remnants of the Byzantine Empire and its mighty Constantinople by the mid-1400s to become one of the most powerful empires of that time period. In this chapter, we're going to learn about what happened in this area beginning in the 1910s. So we're going to be looking at the Middle East and the battle for Israel, all right? And so she starts with a story of these two men and talking about their secret meetings in 1916. Now you have to remember, 1914 through 1918 is when World War happened. And so considering that we're starting in the 1910s and she's talking about the story in the 1916, that would be right in the middle of World War I. And so the men, Mark Sykes from the British government and a guy who's got a super hard name to pronounce from the French government, believed, like most aristocrat empire men, that the Middle East should be under European empires. So we're going to be discussing a little bit about their influence from the British government and the French government, their influence and their desires for the Middle East. 400 years after the conquest of the city of Constantinople, what was left of the Ottoman Empire of 1850 through 1922 is sometimes referred to as the sick man of Europe, because various European countries took turns propping it up in order to keep Russia from gaining direct access to the Mediterranean Sea from the Black Sea. And so we'll be discussing a little bit of the geography as well. Moving forward, we're going to be looking specifically at these two men. There's a picture of Mark Sykes right here, and then the guy from the French government, Francois, or however you say his name, but you got their pictures right there. So keep that in mind in case the activity sheets make you draw a picture of one of them. You can try and draw that. They both got mustaches, so I know how much most of you in the class love drawing mustaches from your doodles and pictures that you've drawn in the past. So have fun with that, all right? We're going to have a narration break, just like we do in every chapter. And after that, we'll learn how the modern nation of Israel would enter the fight for existence. Israel, perhaps one of the most controversial and fought-over nations in the history of the world, is, to this day, the target of criticism, persecution, and Islamic attack. So for the narration break, we're going to be discussing the last decades of the once mighty Ottoman Empire and what happened to the geographical area after the European powers divided it amongst themselves. A little note here says that Israel didn't just attract Jewish immigrants from Europe who were fleeing the devastation of World War II and the Holocaust. Jews from all around the world flocked to the country. This photo shows Jewish people from Yemen shortly after their arrival in Israel in 1950. And the connect here says in 1950, a rather remarkable law was passed by Israel's Knesset. The Parliament of modern Israel This law's opening words state that Israel's central purpose is this. Okay, so this is the law, and this is what they said Israel's purpose was. Every Jew has the right to come to Israel. That's pretty cool. Now, when the modern state of Israel was established and recognized by the United Nations as a legitimate autonomous nation, that means that it governs itself. They didn't have someone else in charge of them. The Jewish people felt that their 2,000 years of wandering were finally over. The law of return is based on the idea that the state of Israel will be open to the immigration of Jews and the ingathering of exiles from all countries of their dispersion. Over the years, the law of return had been amended to narrow down the actual definition of what it means to be of Jewish descent. Do you have to be 100% Jewish? Did you have to be half Jewish? So the law of return added some extra rules in there to help determine what was considered Jewish and what wasn't. The law of return also helped the Jewish state to make sure that the population majority is Jewish. So a couple of notes on that as well. Many people look at the problem between the Palestinians and Israelis as one of the most complicated conflicts on the globe at this time. Part of this conflict comes from the fact that many radical Islamic Palestinians did not recognize Israel as an autonomous state. They didn't believe that the Jewish state had a right to exist. They thought that someone needed to be in control of the Jews and that the Jews couldn't be in control of themselves. They viewed the Israeli presence as enemies occupying Palestinian land. In reality, however, the current state of Israel is the third autonomous Jewish state in that geographical area. And so the Palestinians thought that Israel was coming in, the Jews were taking their land, but they weren't even the first ones there. And so they seemed to be a little bit confused there. The first state was the first kingdom of Israel between 1000 and 586 BC. The second was between 538 and 63 BC, and the third is the modern state of Israel. So this is the third time that they've been autonomous there, all right? I want you to understand that. They have a history of being there, and so now the Palestinians were getting upset and be like, whoa, you can't be here, this is our land. Well, they'd been there for like thousands of years, so they need to get their facts right. Moving on, one of the things that I want to look at in this narration break says, discuss the establishment of the state of Israel and the conflict in the Middle East. Locate all the events on the map. So you have your map here, and you can see the different areas, the land. You can see down on the left, you have Egypt, where we know that Israel once was. You have the Red Sea below that, which would have been the sea that God parted when they left. You have Jerusalem. You have a lot of different areas that are going to help you better understand the conflict, who's in control. This map shows the agreement that Sykes and Picot made in 1916 over dividing the Middle East between France and Britain as World War I raged. So you have your different zones that would let you know who is in control of what land. So you have the blue zone, which is French control, the purple zone, or the A zone, which is French influence. The red zone is direct British control. The B zone, or that little gold area right there, would be British influence. And then the Allied zone, or that kind of light tan colored zone, it would be jointly controlled by British, French, Russians, and Italians. So that'll kind of help you better understand what you're reading about as different areas or different authorities try to take control of different land. And that's from 1916. And then the church history. Something that the author wants us to note is that there has been a Catholic presence in Israel since the first Latin patriarchate of Jerusalem was established in the crusade state of the Kingdom of Jerusalem in the year 1099. Before that, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem had led the Christians there. When the Mamluks destroyed the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1291, the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem was only a name until it was re-established in 1847. 15 patriarchs later, the Latin Patriarchate is still enjoying success. The current Patriarch, Fuad, I guess that's how you say that, is assisted by 4 vicars based in Jerusalem, Ammon, Nazareth, and Cyprus. Interestingly, Israel is the only nation in the Middle East that actually has a growing Christian community. A survey in 2006 counted 148,000 Christians living in the state of Israel. And that was 14 years ago. This number is 2.1% of the total population of Israel and shows a growth of 4 times the number of Christians in 1948. The Israeli Christian community is divided into 4 main groups: Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and non-Chalcedonian. Of the total Christian population, about 80,000 are Catholics and are divided between several denominations. The oldest of these is the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem, which we learned about in our previous paragraph. The largest Catholic denomination is the Michite community, which is centered mostly around Galilee and has approximately 50,000 members. The Christian community's voice in the Israeli government is through the Ministry's Department of Christian Communities. This department is responsible for bringing what concerns the Christian communities to the government. In 2004, the Israeli Knesset Christian Allies Caucus was established with the goal of improving the relationship between the Jews and the Christians. Okay? And so just a little bit of the church history there. You'll have your pictures that you can look at that kind of help cement things in your mind. This would be Joppa right here. The top would be the Jerusalem. It's the capital of Israel. Tel Aviv is one of the country's largest and most important cities. In fact, many consider it the business and cultural capital of modern Israel. Got some of their food. I miss being able to look at all these pictures of food with you from the class. This would be falafel. I've never had falafel before. I know that some people really like it. It would be interesting to try. But these would be falafel sandwiches, and they got falafel balls, which would be like meatballs, with a yogurt sauce and vegetables in flatbread. So it looks pretty good. But just some of the information that you're going to have to go over in this chapter. Again, I want you to read through the material on your own. Let me know if you are not understanding something or if you're stuck. And then I will put out a second video to go over the specifics of the packet with you, your activity sheets and your timeline. Okay? So